Welcome to episode 3 of my training diaries for the 2022 season. This week I've been testing out 2 new pairs of shoes from Salomon, the S-Lab Phantasm for on the road and the S-Lab Pulsar for on the trails. I'll talk more about these shoes later, and I'm also going to walk you through how I plan my long runs in response to a question that I had on last week's episode. But first, let's talk about this last week of training. So I took last Monday off as a rest day, as always. Tuesday, I then did an easy run on the trails, just under 90 minutes with my usual Tuesday night run group. Wednesday was then my first of my 2 weekly strength training sessions. And I won't go into too much detail on this week, but I've been listing all of the exercises I do in the gym on Strava, so you can go through the notes for those workouts if you are interested in learning more. And of course, check back to last week's episode where I talked in more detail about my overall approach to strength training in case you missed it. That evening, I then did my first of 2 structured run workouts for the week. This week was a tempo or threshold run, and I wanted to keep it as runnable as possible, so I headed back to the Seymour Valley Trailway where I did one of my 2 long runs last weekend. And that route was actually probably a little bit too hilly for speed work, but it was paved and I was really itching to test out those new Salomon Phantasms. The workout was a 20-minute warm-up followed by 5 repeats of 30 seconds of hard running, so zone 5, with 30 seconds of easy running in between each. I then transitioned into 3 sets of 8 minutes at threshold or tempo pace, where it's difficult to speak in full sentences, with 5 minutes of easy running in between each of those. And I followed all of this with a 10-minute cool down on my way back to the car. The Salomon Phantasms felt great for this workout. They're feather light and fast with just enough cushion underfoot. Just let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in a full review, and I'll include a link below where you can learn more and compare prices in the meantime. Something I've been struggling with, pun intended actually, is in trying to do these run workouts immediately after my gym workouts, when I really should be doing it the other way around. The way I've been scheduling my training sessions in the gym though for the past few months just doesn't quite give me enough time to get my run workouts done first, because I usually have a few calls to do in the morning and early afternoon for work. But I'm finally going to do the sensible thing and schedule my gym sessions for a little bit later in the evening so that I can run first. Because as I mentioned last week, my strength training is intended to support my running and not the other way around. So I definitely need to prioritize being able to give it my all during my run workouts, even if it means being able to lift a little bit less later in the gym. On Thursday, I then did just an hour of cross training on the gravel bike with Audrey. The idea here was just to get the legs moving a bit to help with recovery, and I definitely needed it after those 2 workouts the day before. We just did an easy loop on some urban trails around North Vancouver here. Friday, I then had a second session at the gym, followed by my second structured running workout. This was an easy run with strides, where I did a 15-minute warm-up, followed by 4 sets of 90 seconds at close to all-out pace, with 2 minutes of easy running in between each, and then a 15-minute cool down. I think I was actually supposed to do 3 minutes of recovery in between each repeat, but that's okay. Saturday was then my long run for the week, which was scheduled for 4.5 hours. And this would make it my longest run so far this season as we continue to increase the volume. As usual, I was looking for something relatively runnable, but it was forecast to rain all day on the North Shore here. The weather looked a little bit better in nearby Burnaby, so Audrey and I decided to hop in the car and drive just over the bridge to Burnaby Lake Park. Alright, so we're out here in Burnaby. We're running around Burnaby Lake, and then I'm going to head over to Burnaby Mountain and then come back here and do another loop around the lake. It's just over the bridge from where we live in North Vancouver, and it's actually right off the highway, but this is a bit of an oasis in the middle of the city. Audrey joined me for the first 10 kilometers or so and then hopped on her bike for the rest. I managed to take a couple of wrong turns and to get a little bit lost on some of the mountain bike trails on Burnaby Mountain. So my pace was a little all over the place, much faster on the 2 flat loops around the lake that I did at the beginning and then again at the end of my run, but much slower on some of the more technical and steep single track on Burnaby Mountain. My average moving pace for the run in the end though was right around target at just over 6 minutes per kilometer, or about 9.5 minutes per mile. I covered 46 kilometers or 20.5 miles in about 4 hours and 40 minutes, with about 750 meters of elevation gain, or roughly 2,500 feet, plus equal descent.
So I'm at about 33K, about 3.5 hours in. All the climbing is behind me though, so it's all flat for the rest of my run. And I'm feeling pretty good. I definitely feel like I have another 10-15K in my legs, which is a good sign. 33K is about what I did both days last weekend during my back-to-backs. So it's a sign that the progression is working.
I had a question last week from Jerome, one of my supporting channel members, about whether I target time or distance on my long runs and how I factor in elevation. And the short answer is that I've always trained based on time on feet as opposed to distance. And this season is technically no different. But usually I don't worry nearly as much about pace when I'm training for more mountainous races, especially when it comes to my 200 milers. For my upcoming race in Georgia though, my goal is to run all of my long runs at roughly the pace that I expect to run during the race of roughly 6 minutes per kilometer, and to do it on terrain that's similar in terms of elevation change, which is roughly 1,000 meters or so for every 45 kilometers. So I was able to calculate that over the course of 4.5 hours, I would need to run about 45 kilometers to hit my goal pace. It was then just a matter of planning a route with the appropriate terrain and elevation change. So I guess you could say that I schedule my runs based on time, but I plan my actual routes based on distance. The way I then actually planned this route was to map it out first using Strava's route builder. Audrey and I tried a few different options, and I wanted to err on the shorter side since it's always easier to add on a few kilometers at the end if need be, which is what I ended up doing. I then exported the GPX file to import into the Coros app in order to load it onto my Vertex 2 watch, just in case. We strategically placed the car where I'd pass it twice during the run in case I needed to get changed if it did end up raining, and to refill my bottles if I couldn't find a water fountain en route, although I carried my nutrition for the entire run with me from the start, along with a rain jacket, but thankfully the rain held off. The amount of total elevation change for this route was a little bit lower than I would have liked, and was also too bunched together on a few really steep climbs. This route was basically pancake flat for the first and last kind of third or so, with a mountain in the middle. So I'd like to find some routes that spread the elevation out a little bit more evenly into more rolling terrain in the future if I can. I did much better on this run on hydration though, which I mentioned in last week's episode was something that I needed to work on for this weekend. I drank a total of 2 liters of water, so right around the target that I'd set for myself of roughly a bottle every hour. I ate 775 calories, so about 175 per hour. And this included about 100 milligrams of caffeine. And I was actually trying a few new nutrition products on this run. I've kind of gotten this habit of just using the same products all the time, mostly because of the Cliff Bar sponsorship that I'd had for a few years. So a new goal of mine is to use the coming weeks to experiment as much as possible with my nutrition. And I plan on talking more about some of these new nutrition products that I'll be trying over the coming weeks, in case you guys are interested in trying out some new stuff too. The Salomon Pulsars worked out great for this run as well. They're definitely designed for faster and less technical trails though, so think more kind of Western states rather than UTMB. The lugs aren't quite as deep as the Salomon Sense Pros that I've been using, and the tread pattern is quite different as well, with less lateral or downhill traction. But given that my route was mostly crushed gravel with a bit of pavement, they were by far the best choice. I do plan on doing a full review on these once I've put a few more miles on them, but I'll include a link below in the meantime for these as well in case you want to learn more. Sunday I woke up feeling pretty stiff, but I had just 90 minutes of easy running on the schedule, which I was able to push through.
So it's Sunday morning. I'm just out for a 90-minute easy run here. It's partly a recovery run and a little bit more time on feet for the week. I'm about 30 minutes in, so I'm finally getting warmed up. But I was definitely feeling pretty stiff this morning after yesterday's long run. But overall, I feel fine, so that's a good sign.
Towards the end of this run though, I was definitely feeling a lot of residual fatigue, which is to be expected. So last week I ran a total of just over 91 kilometers or 57 miles with 1,650 meters of elevation gain, or about 5,300 feet, plus equal descent. So it's Monday today, which is my rest day, and I've got an appointment for a well-deserved massage later this afternoon before I get back to training starting again tomorrow. This week includes another tempo run on Wednesday, followed by back-to-back long runs on the weekend. I appreciate the support from my channel members as always, so be sure to keep those questions and suggestions for future topics coming. And you can become a channel member if you haven't yet by clicking the join button from a web browser. This week I'll also be publishing the second of a new series of headlamp reviews that I have in the works. You can watch my first, in case you missed it, on the high-powered Nightcore HC68, which I published last week. And I hope you have a chance to spend some time on the trails this week as well, and I will talk to you all next week.